I swear, bro, never in my life have I hated chickens more than during the stupid minigame. Get over here, you stupid piece of... I consider the original Final Fantasy VII to be one of my favorite video games of all time. I say that without a tinge of nostalgia, by the way, as I'd played the game for the first time only a few years ago on the PS Vita. Actually, my first playthrough of the original was an interesting one, as I decided to finally jump into the boots of Cloud Strife right when his remake was afoot. Not having the patience to wait until after I'd finished my journey with the classic 1997 polygonal crew to jump into Final Fantasy VII Remake, I decided that I would play through the entire Midgar section of the original, then jump into Remake as that game only covered the story up until the end of the Midgar section, then jump back into the original and finish off the journey. It was a very interesting experience, to say the least, and it allowed me to compare and contrast the changes Square Enix had made to this world and story with an immediacy that was quite illuminating, actually. With that said, it only took a few hours into my playthrough of Remake to realize just how different this game was from its original. Some of these changes were refreshing and new, some curious and questionable, and others just flat out jarring and unnecessary. These changes in gameplay, structure, and overall tonal sensibilities would carry over tenfold into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a game that I finally started playing a couple of weeks ago. And even though I am highly critical of some of these changes and additions, thinking some to be frustratingly superfluous and others laughably cringeworthy, I cannot deny that they have charmed their way into me in a Kingdom Hearts-like fashion that I was not expecting. So, I would like to take today to talk about how, despite its many flaws and follies, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth carries with it a charm and sense of wonder that's unlike anything else. Hey, my name's Shaz and welcome to Pixel Switch, a place for video games, basketball, and movies. If you're into any of that, consider subscribing. All of my gaming content lives right here on YouTube, basketball and film content are on 2 separate TikTok accounts, and all of my videos get published as articles on my website, pixel-switch.com. You can find links to everything in the description below. Thanks so much for your support, it means the world. Now, back to the video. For anyone who's played the original Final Fantasy VII, you'll know that the opening Midgar section takes roughly 5 to 7 hours to complete. As such, when it was announced that Remake would only cover the Midgar section of the game, many brows were understandably furrowed. Because how long could a modern remake of just the opening of this game take? 10 hours? Maybe 15 if Square Enix luxuriates in the cinematics and overall presentation? Oh, sweet child, no. Try 40 hours. Double that if, God help you, you're a completionist. Now, if only the first few hours of the original game could be expanded to a near full-size JRPG, one shudders to think about the number of hours the masterminds at Square could shove into their following entry, given that we're now delving into the open world proper. What could it be? 300 hours? 500? Well, thankfully, it's not quite as egregious. According to HowLongToBeat.com, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth can take a little under 100 hours for a playthrough that sees players stray off the beaten path and dabble in some of the side content, with a completionist run taking upwards of 150 hours. This would be fine if Rebirth covered the remainder of 7's story, but as we all know, that's not the case. Frankly, I'm not even sure if Rebirth reaches 50% of the remaining story. So combining Remake and Rebirth's playtimes, we're looking at a game that's not twice, but thrice longer than the original game, multiple times more if you're a completionist, yet still barely reaches the halfway point of the original story. The question that everyone should be emphatically asking then is, why? What on earth are you doing or seeing in these games that's stretching their runtime to ungodly lengths? Well, the answer is bloat, and a lot of it. Firstly, there's a ton of side content in both of these games. Rebirth specifically has so much going on in its open world, from Assassin's Creed-like towers, combat encounters with special enemies, treasure outposts, sanctuaries to unlock, a string of missions to find something called a proto-relic, and a lot more. Not to mention, each region has about a half a dozen NPC side quests, most of which take a not insignificant amount of time. Then, of course, there are the minigames. Good lord, the minigames. Frankly, at times it feels like Rebirth is more a string of minigames than actual game. But you know what? All of that would be fine. Because this all sounds like your standard open world RPG or JRPG affair. And on paper, it is. The problem is, it all feels like padding for padding's sake. And this sentiment of mine is not simply because of all these extracurricular activities. No, it's because the moment-to-moment experience of playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and how you're meant to interact with all of these extracurricular activities feels padded and frustratingly slow. The animations for when Cloud scales a wall or rappels down a cliff feel a few seconds too long. The pace at which your chocobo climbs a cliff face feels far slower than it should be. And pressing the dash button during this climb is laughably negligible from your chocobo's regular animation. Pushing or dragging a cart to complete a dungeon puzzle feels slow, as does shimmying across a ledge, a motion you'll be doing quite often in your playthrough. As such, going from tower to tower, having to wait for Cloud to slowly climb each of their ladders, or doing the same little minigame that's not even challenging for every sanctuary gets boring fairly quickly. And their rewards are oftentimes not even that worthwhile, leading me to quickly forgo doing these activities altogether the further I got in the game, as neither their perks nor the narrative surrounding their completion is of any value. Then there are the many times you're tasked to perform a scripted slow crawl towards an objective, and all you can do is simply gawk at Cloud's ripped body as you push up on the left control stick and ponder how such a fit lad can move his limbs at such a pace it makes retirees look like Usain Bolt. And of course, I can't forget about the number of conversations you'll have with characters and NPCs, all of which are littered with animeisms like unnecessary grunts, sighs, and giggles, making for a fatiguing pace and a frankly cringeworthy narrative tone.
The remake's voice acting is stuck in this mysterious limbo zone. It's not robot mode, but it's not good either. Characters can be convincing at times, but then ruin the illusion with their horrible anime grunting.
To circle back to the minigames, on one hand, the sheer number of minigames Square Enix has shoved into Rebirth is pretty impressive. On the other hand, there were certain moments where I felt their inclusion was completely unnecessary. Take Costa del Sol, for instance, one of the earlier locations in the game. Narratively, this sunny resort acts as a reprieve for our heroes. Mechanically, however, it's a test of patience as the game forces you to go through a series of minigames to progress the story. A couple of these games are admittedly somewhat decent, like Red 13's Rocket League knockoff and Tifa's piano recital, but others, like scurrying around the map trying to take pictures of cactuars or having to find all the different colored wheelies, were just boring. The slow animations, forced pace stoppers like crawling through corridors, and incessant minigames all add up quickly to make for a playing experience that feels like Square Enix is simply trying to hit their word count. There are a couple of genuinely great minigames, don't get me wrong. Queen's Blood, for one, may overtake Gwent as the best in-game card game of all time, but those couple get lost amidst the sea of goofy and half-baked minigames that feel at odds with the otherwise incredibly high production quality of this game. Speaking of goofy, I remember Final Fantasy VII Remake having some awkward voice acting, with characters often doing their best Kingdom Hearts impression with random sighs and giggles. But I'd forgotten to what level in the years since I'd played the game and was starkly reminded of just how goofy these cutscenes could get with Rebirth. Especially seeing that the last Final Fantasy game I played was 16, whose story I adored and was pleasantly taken aback by, as its wonderfully grounded and gritty voice acting and narrative sensibilities brought a depth and nuance I hadn't seen in a Final Fantasy game in a long time, if ever. Going from that to Rebirth was a jarring experience, to say the least. Now, I understand that 7 and 16 are different games, with 7 having some purposeful, lighthearted silliness. That's not the issue. The issue is that I remember those silly moments quite vividly in the original PlayStation 1 game, and they were incredibly charming and brought a needed levity to a pretty grim narrative and world. In these remakes, however, especially Rebirth, those moments, in addition to all the other silly and goofy cutscenes Square Enix have added, are executed with an awkwardness akin to Kingdom Hearts through oddly directed voice acting and poor scene pacing, which in turn dilute the impact of the more serious themes and overall narrative. So I've spent nearly 1,700 words thus far being critical of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Yet what I've yet to reveal is that I still really like this game. I may even go as far as to say that I love it. I didn't at first, or even after the first dozen or so hours, but eventually I came to truly enjoy this game for what it was. Maybe this is called Stockholm Syndrome, I don't know, but I cannot deny that Square Enix, for all their flaws and missteps, have put a lot of love into Rebirth. Maybe too much, leading to a lot of unnecessary padding. But once I disassociated this game from the original and accepted it for what it was instead of what I thought it should be as a fan of the PS1 classic, it began to click. This world is gorgeous, these characters ooze charm, and this combat system is one of the greatest amongst any action RPGs. I mentioned Kingdom Hearts a couple of times during this article in a way that would make it seem I wasn't a fan of that series. Truth be told, I've played through most of the mainline Kingdom Hearts games and genuinely love them for what they are. They're nonsensical and ridiculous with some of the cringiest storytelling and voice acting to ever exist. Yet the creativity, heart, and wonder injected into each entry are undeniable. And that's why I made the comparison, because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has a heart that's filled with splendor. It's annoying and awkward and bloated and silly. Yet I can't sit here and tell you that I didn't have a stupid smile on my face throughout the entirety of the Gold Saucer chapter. Thank you so much for watching and indulging me in all of my thoughts about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Let me know what your thoughts are on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Remake and 7 in general in the comments below. Subscribe if you're into these types of videos, and thank you again for watching. Your support means the world, and I will see you next time. Peace.